Von here, Senior Ecosystem and Partnerships Associate at Beyond Form. We are back with the first ever episode of 2023, where we consider the different ways to upskill this year. Whether you are a fashion designer looking to add some tech innovation into your brand, or a data scientist or any tech person or anyone else from outside of the fashion world looking to apply your expertise to the fashion industry, this discussion helps you to understand how you could learn about the other side of whichever skill you're wanting to do or learn this year. You'll be hearing in this episode Peter and I speaking with Beatrice Newman, Head of Fashion at University of East London, owner of Korlekie, as well as founder of Mode, which is one of the startups that is incubated at Beyond Form Venture Studio, talking all about the ways in which we can upskill this year, as well as benefit ourselves on a personal as well as professional level.
Sometimes we look at all of the things going on and we feel like we need to be present for all of them, but I think sometimes it's about picking and choosing and thinking about what works for you. Not everyone needs to do 3D asset design, especially if that's not really what your business is about or what it's doing. It might not be the right time.
Be sure to listen to the end so that you can get some tips on how you could upskill this year.
Hey everybody, it's Peter Junho-Sankey, the CEO of Beyond Form, and I'm joined by Von and I'm joined by Beatrice.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
So today's podcast episode is about the new year and how, if you're working in fashion, how you could potentially upskill for some of those more industry hot topics and sought after skills moving forward. So in today's episode, of course, we have the lovely Von with us as normal, but we're also joined by Beatrice Newman, who is Head of Fashion at the University of East London. She has her own fashion brand called Korlekie. She has studied fashion design and digital fashion and has been in the industry for several years. So she's going to be giving some insights today and some thoughts as to what professionals, entrepreneurs, students, and anyone looking to upskill in 2023 might want to think about when choosing the right courses or programs or what skills to focus on. So in terms of today's episode, just a little bit of a context, we have seen actually over the last even 5 years, very recently, skills like digital fashion, creating 3D assets using Close 3D or Rhino or Browseware are very much in need now. Companies like Nike, Adidas, and even your mainstream high street ones have sprouted their own digital fashion departments. We see from a business side that a lot of the more management roles now are asking for data analytics skills, data science skills, and some of those left field skills that were not necessarily associated with fashion in the past. We, myself and Von, working with IFA Paris, one of our other partners, we have fashion brands coming to us that are actively looking for fresh graduates with innovation skills, with technology skills, with sustainability skills, and all of this plethora as the industry moves forward. So that is today's topic. Beatrice, starting off with you, please do tell us about your background and how did you get into the fashion industry?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Peter. So I guess I don't want to say like the majority of designers, but when you hear the majority of designers speak about how they got into fashion, I think a lot of them have said they used to flip through the pages of Vogue magazine, or they saw one of their parents either being a tailor or a seamstress to VIP or personal clients. Personally, for me, it was I loved fairy tales, Disney princess. I was all about the little princess, when I was young. And that sort of transformation point where they sort of went from rags to riches, or I don't want to say ugly because they weren't necessarily ugly, but there was this moment within the film where they just changed and, they let it go, quoting Frozen here. And I just said that I would love to be able to be part of someone's transformation, because I thought there was something quite special and unique about that. When I think developed over the years and began to understand different types of career in a creative field and realized that fashion was actually a potential career to go down, I think I was like, right, this is probably what I really want to do. I think that decision was solidified when who remembers cable and watching fashion TV, for instance, that you know how old I am. And seeing one of the John Galliano shows for Dior, I think it was titled Empires or Princes and Princesses or something like that. But the gowns are just so amazing and extravagant. I never knew that fashion could be so explorative and so unique and inspirational. So I was like, if he can do it, this is something that I definitely want to explore myself. So that's how I actually got into fashion.
So it gives our listeners some context. Beatrice is also the founder of Mode, one of the Beyond Form Venture Studio incubated startups. What is Mode, Beatrice?
So Mode is an online fashion educational platform. If we just maybe backtrack a bit, because you did also ask me how I got into the fashion industry, and I think it's really important to then understand why mode comes into it. So just like many other designers in this sort of generational age, I went to fashion school, studied fashion design. And I guess as my experience and my understanding of the whole industry grew, I then moved forward into, I guess, developing in the fashion industry, either via internship, working in retail, and then coming into my own via launching my brand, Korlekie. On the side, I was working within academia. I kind of fell into academia as opposed to something that I wanted as a career for myself. And that was just based on numerous competitions that I had entered when I was a student doing my BA. And I guess people just loving the stuff that I had done. And I was kind of a crazy student at that point, crazy in being that a lot of my stuff was just heavily embellished and I hardly ever slept. And I guess it rubbed off the right way of people in the industry, because they would always talk about my process and they wanted me to share my experiences. So one thing led to another. And being within the educational academia system, I began to realize some of the loopholes or things that were missing from the curriculum, that not because it was missing on purpose, but I mean, you think 3 years in a degree is long, sometimes 4 or 5 for those who do foundational golden placement. But actual fact, there's so much more to learn within fashion. And once you kind of finish university, you can feel like a fish out of water. You're drowning, you don't have the same support system as you had before, and you're left to figure things out on your own, particularly on the side of business, which they don't really teach in traditional fashion education. So enter Mode, the online fashion platform educational experience, where we really tackle subjects around business entrepreneurism within the creative and fashion space. Is very different from actual business. I think we need to highlight that. And it also looks into common themes that are really important now in the development of the industry, such as technology and also sustainability. And we seek to work with, not against universities, because it's important, I think, to really develop the educational system that we do have across the world, and I think be that bridge and further support for current students and also graduates, and those students or people who don't really want to go to university but do want to start a career, because you can also do that as well, but you just need further information. So Mode acts as a bridge from fashion education into the industry.
Thank you so much for that that background there. It is quite interesting that you mentioned, obviously, how you kind of got into the academia side of things, from actually basically working hard and being noticed for it, pretty much. I can imagine you don't miss those kind of probably what you had as all-nighters and stuff as well.
Oh my God, Juan. I can't even begin to explain.
Nightmare. But actually then you did obviously go on to mention about the important skills that you are actually covering as well in from Mode. And obviously this it's kind of like two-way thing. There's obviously students who would come to you wanting to develop a brand from Mode. Then on the flip side, there may be people trying to understand how brands work. And in this case, going back to those other skills and other broadness of what fashion is now really delving into, such as obviously 3D assets, creation, data science, and obviously, like you said, sustainability management as well. So in this case, what would you actually say is, what you individuals should focus on when upskilling actually in these areas?
When I first saw those questions, I feel like they all work hand in hand together. It's very difficult to kind of take them apart because you'll start one thing and then it kind of needs the other one to kind of make it work. But if I had to put them in order of succession in how you would develop a fashion or creative business, I think for me, the sort of the data science aspect of understanding within the fashion industry is very, very important. What we mean by data science, just in case some of you don't know, is sort of general trend forecasting, understanding your customer, things like that. If you don't really understand your customer, it means you don't really understand the product you're developing. You're just really simply an artist putting things out there. So where we come from from the mode aspect, for instance, is really understanding your product within the customer space. What do they actually really like? Tweaking and refining. When you've kind of got the data science bit down, you would then sort of move towards building the structure of the business, because I guess by that time things are working out for you. So I would then say you'd move on to actual sustainable management. What I interpret by that though is not just about the materializations that you use, which conversations tend to go down when we talk in fashion, like, oh, it's the sustainable materials, etc. I think we need to be honest that even the most sustainable materials are not necessarily always sustainable too, and there's always just going to be this whole argument. So it's great to think about that when you're looking at the product, but I think it's also important to think about sustainability from an infrastructure perspective. So the people you employ, the logistical systems of getting it from points A to B, all of that sort of footprint waste that some brands or majority of brands don't tend to look at, because they just sort of pick the first thing that comes out. It's very easy for them, and as long as the product's coming out, they're really happy. But I think we're moving into an age where we have to be a lot more conscious about the decisions that we make as individuals and how that actually impacts more individuals around us. So I think it's being more careful and cherry picking who you work with, and understanding why you work with those companies, why you purchase materials from them, so on and so forth, and perhaps even being a bit more local in regards to how you produce. And then we get to 3D asset management, which can still sort of be done a little bit more earlier, but I think that's also more explorative. So once you've got, again, the data science and the sustainability management angle down, I think you can then further explore, okay, how does 3D asset management move forward into boosting my business? For example, with Korlekie, I'd say that we're in a space now where we've kind of got the data science down. We're working with manufacturers, so the sort of sustainability infrastructure is being built. And we're now at a point where, just like any creative, we're burning with desire to create new designs, but we don't want to create new designs because that's just kind of against the business structure we're developing, and we don't know if our customer's actually going to buy it. We just want to design for design's sake. So I think part of that whole bringing in 3D asset into our work would be maybe using AI software, where we can showcase sort of input into the algorithm, some designs that we've done, some keywords, etc., and then a computer generates a design for us. We can put it out there and not only sort of grow our following, grow our brand and interest, but if people are starting to say, this looks really cool, I really like that, then we already know, sort of linking back into data science, that this is what our customers actually really like, and then move forward to actually producing it. So long-winded answer, but yeah, data science, sustainable management, and then 3D assets.
But like, would you try to focus doing on all of these things, or one thing over the other? Like, where does one actually focus?
Oh, this is a hard question. I mean, actually, it's not a hard question, because if you consider about 10, 15 years ago, even though sort of 3D technology was in a hemisphere, it's not as intuitive as it was today. So consider that wasn't really available. You sort of then start thinking about data science, which has kind of been there and in the ether or in the air, but no one really sort of naming it. They're just doing it without realizing. So for me, data science is a no-brainer. That's how we started off. And then you then eventually got into sustainable management when people began to realize that the traditional way of doing fashion business wasn't sustainable at all. So you did it that way, and then you eventually get to 3D asset management. I mean, that's the way my mind thinks. I'm not saying it's the only way. There might be some businesses that actually do start from the 3D asset management. That might actually be the whole business infrastructure. And so then it would move across into then data science and then back into sustainable management. So I think it depends on your business. Looking at the traditional fashion business, the way I've approached it, it works better for me in the way that I've illustrated.
I don't know what about you, Vaughn, but I think for me, I've naturally always gravitated towards more of the technology side of things from an upskilling perspective. Definitely when I was studying X amount of years ago, there was no technology or innovation in there. There was the beginnings of sustainability as a theme, but at a very surface level. So I think from an upskilling perspective, I think it's good to always, of course, have an eye on what is happening in all areas, but I don't think you can always do just one thing. I don't know if you think the same thing, Vaughn.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Because especially now, there are a lot of things that are happening in the fashion industry, and I'm sure that there are students who may, if they are keeping up with the news, who may be coming across all of these other tech things that we are obviously interested in, and then wondering, okay, so how on earth am I going to even know about this? Because like when dealing with fashion design students, for example, some of whom I've spoken to directly have just said they had no clue where to start when it comes to fashion tech, especially when more kind of like directly speaking in terms of like the digital fashion side. How do I learn this software and things like that? So I think that is obviously one way why it's important that it is being offered in schools, for example, and obviously other extra courses. But when it comes to then really defining the first step to exactly which one is the most important to upskill, it can be really difficult to choose, to be fair. It's quite easy once you start to know yourself, I guess, as a designer. Obviously, if you are looking to make a brand, it does become quite easier because you can just easily kind of attach it to your values and where you're going to get the most out of your brand, really, and things like that. But other people may argue that as a brand, they're probably trying to actually focus on the marketing side of it. Like they just want to stand out. So they're just going to add some tech to it or something. So I guess then it really does then also depend on your personal goals as well. Like what you're going to get out of upskilling yourself in this specific area.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. So Beatrice, where does somebody start there and how do they go about it? Segue into like a mini pitch for mode. But yes, how does somebody start?
I think that's a tough question because I think as Vaughn very eloquently put, there is no, I don't feel like there is any roadmap per se. You kind of just know when you need to move to the next step because things are just are progressing. You're like, okay, I need a bit of this or I need a bit of that. Based on a lot of the companies that have come through mode, I mean, we've had like sort of 3 different types of people or student. So if we look at it from a student perspective, they'll come to mode just to really understand the business side. And so this is really where I think mode supports them in their understanding and giving them the confidence that they need to be upskilled in that business side, particularly also the financial and really understanding what it means to be fashion. I think, I don't know if you would agree, Peter or Yvonne, but when we were students, we were sort of dazzled by the catwalk and the glitz and glam and the fame of fashion. But then you get into fashion and it's really not glitz and glam. And no matter how and no matter how famous you are, if you don't have a good business infrastructure put in place, I mean, the finances and the money just drains from your bank account very quickly, and you just find yourself in debt. So I think having that knowledge of business and finance is super important. And so that's what we do for graduates. For those who have sort of graduated for a longer time and have already maybe established their brand, I think Mode really supports more their understanding of how they can further diversify and develop their products. So we've had really amazing people, companies or brands come on board where they're doing really, really well, but then the business is kind of slowing down in regards to growth. And so Mode really starts to get them to think a little bit more about how are they sort of changing in regards to, from I guess the data science perspective, their customer. Has it moved on? Has it progressed? Are their customers looking for something else that they're maybe not fulfilling? So it's constant research, isn't it? We tend to forget about that as designers, because in our heads we're always thinking we have one design code, and as long as I keep dishing those looks out, people are gonna buy. But things change, trends change, and all of these things. So I think we need to always be on the cusp of how can I continue to diversify my business in that way. So again, segueing back into the whole data science thing, it's understanding how these 3 points move together in a cycle. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, Peter.
In terms of where does somebody start? I guess, how have you stayed relevant, Beatrice?
Yeah, I think it's a tough one, because with Mode, we talk a lot about this whole developing a business from a one product perspective. And like I was illustrating before, I think it gets to a point where your business can grow quite well with that one product and with variations that you just now want to start creating, especially when you're on social media a lot promoting, you see other brands doing really great things. It's very easy for you to forget what you're focusing on and just start to just do things in the name of being relevant. But I think trends come along, they turn around pretty quickly within fashion to a point where we have so many tribes, if you want to call them, of different types of customers who wear things consistently or like to rotate their wardrobe. So I think it's about being on the beat with what's going on worldwide, not particularly always within fashion. I always like to say to my students, you need to be reading what's going on in the newspapers around the world globally, because these actually influence things of what's actually happening within fashion as well. I mean, a very sort of easy way we can talk about how you stay relevant and what's going on within the world is, for instance, we look about sustainability, not just maybe materialization, but production. Issey Miyake was phenomenal in how he used machinery and technology to create pleats, please, and garments that didn't necessarily need to be, I think, cut or sewn, or they were all done on a tube, for instance. And that, in a way, was explosive in how you could, redevelop your fashion style in using production as a way of inspiration. So I feel like I'm answering your question, but I'm just answering it in so many different ways, Peter, because I don't really feel like there's any one way of staying relevant. And I think when we talk about relevance in fashion, I don't know if relevance actually exists, because there are just so many different types of people in the world. I think it's really important to stay true to who you are, whilst also understanding how your product can diversify but still have your unique code within it.
Yeah, which is great and completely makes sense in terms of obviously like also brand identity, who you are as a designer, and completely love Pleats Please, by the way, one of my favorite collections. And actually on that as well, you mentioned looking kind of outside of fashion for further inspiration as to kind of what you're working with in fashion. But how does one kind of go about that? Besides you mentioned kind of looking at the news and stuff, how can one really delve into it actually, as maybe like a professional entrepreneur, designer, smaller brand who really does want to get in touch with other industries such as tech? That's a completely different world to fashion, and bringing it in to actually kind of make it work and still bring that into their own fashion space?
I mean, sometimes we look at all of the things going on and we feel like we need to be present for all of them. But I think sometimes it's about picking and choosing and working what work and thinking about what works for you. Not everyone needs to do 3D asset design, especially if that's not really what your business is about or what it's doing. It might not be the right time. We need to consider that majority of designers that come through Mode are startups who don't necessarily have a lot of capital. And even if they did have a lot of capital, it's about really, I think, put forward within the product. And you don't want to diversify your business too quickly because it becomes too difficult to manage, especially if you're kind of the only person on your team, right? So I think it's about just really instigating strategy. What is your strategy within the business, and what are you trying to do? And once you've kind of understood what that end goal is, I think you can then consider what's most important and what can I maybe move forward to doing later on. When you think that way, I think, let's say now with Korlekie, I want to move into 3D asset management. I've kind of reached a point in my business where I can manage it. So if I do need to take a few courses, I need to spend a little bit of money, it's strategically, been set in stone for this year. So I have the time to do it, as opposed to someone saying, I want to do 3D asset and I also want to do this new collection. I mean, you're never really going to have the mindset physically to put your all into it and do a really good job of it. And I think that's what we see a lot today, is that designers are trying to be a jack of all trades, master of none. The industry is asking us to be a jack of all trades, but it doesn't also mean you can't sit down and just slow it down, right? And take the time you need to learn. And whether that's through internship, which I think is probably the best way in which you can learn from some of these, new things going on, internships, coming on board to platforms like Mode, where you're having experts of industry talking you through some of the things that you're doing. So it's not just, again, dazzle and sparkle within a name and I'm just going to learn Code 3D, but it's like, well, why are you doing Code 3D and how does it work within a business? So theory into practice. And then I think also just by reading, we forget that reading is actually pretty important, and a lot of my students tend to forget that, or they don't read and they come on a design degree thinking all they're doing is going to draw and to make. But actually, I've been inspired by some of the amazing sort of words that are put on display on a page to me. So it helps me really understand how it would work in reality. Whether that's reading what's it called? Shoe Dog from Nike. There's one by Alexander McQueen and John Galliano. I've completely forgotten the name of it. And understanding that process, to regular blogs such as The Business of Fashion, or even like fashion tech, industry news, and understanding how you would apply it. I think social media has become a really great news platform as well, where accounts who are using, for instance, AI or 3D asset development shows you how things can be utilized for your business. And so you might then want to further explore, even collaborate. We don't talk a lot about collaboration, but collaborations are also there. So I guess in a nutshell, there are many ways into the industry and how you can further develop yourself in all of these different aspects. But it really just, again, going back to what you were saying earlier, it depends on where you are within your business and understand how it strategically fits in. Otherwise, there's really no point sometimes doing certain things if you haven't even got your business set out.
Yeah, completely agree. I think there are a lot of people who do try to kind of fit everything in one, and then you end up just losing, well, if from a brand perspective, you end up just kind of losing the whole point, and it can actually even be confusing for the customers, in fact, as well, just where you stand. But yeah, on that note, what are your top 5 tips for upskilling in 2023?
I think it's a tough one.
You can also, I guess, get in touch with kind of what you may have done in the past to learn a new skill. For example, if I'm correct, Korlekie is doing crochet. So in this case, that is a type of upskill from what you may have already learned in fashion school. So kind of how did that go about, and obviously other things. Yeah.
Okay, so let's try and break it down. I think from a Korlekie perspective, top 5 tips for upskilling in 2023 is, first of all, know your craft. What are you selling? It's not about developing a whole collection of artistic looks and then putting it on social media. No, I think you need to understand what your brand is saying about you, what's your narrative, and what is your product offering that people are going to remember you by. And I don't know, people might be thinking, well, what does that matter in regards to upskilling? Well, for Korlekie, we were doing a lot of everything, and it didn't really make sense. As you said, Von, our customers were actually quite confused. So when we just focused on a particular type of crochet knit style, and we knew the product we were offering, we were then able to further develop that technique and actually finesse it to the point where it can actually be reproduced, not just by me, but by a factory. So number one, know who you are and what you're presenting, what your product is. I think number two was in my head, so I'm just going to say it, is I think it's really important to gain feedback about what you're developing, because again, that is part of upskilling. Again, a lot of creators feel like they don't need to hear feedback, or they're very scared of hearing feedback, especially if it's negative. But no one can really grow in this industry if you're not really kind of falling down, learning from your mistakes, getting up again and trying again. So I think that's actually a really important part of upskilling. 3, obviously enroll onto Mode. Take one of our courses, because that in itself is upskilling from a business perspective and strategy, and you have experts on hand at your whim to support you through some of the questions that you might ask whilst taking the course, and hopefully solidify a little bit more of your knowledge of business and a little bit of financial management. Last 2, so 4, I think 4 would be, I think it's okay to explore other types of businesses that you're admired by, and look at their business infrastructure and see how that can sort of really work for you, and maybe what you're doing, what they're doing differently compared to yours, and why they're successful, and see how you can further build into what you're doing. And then 5, if you can travel, I would say, get out there, travel, go see what's happening globally within the world. If that's up through, fashion weeks, or if it's trade shows, or just sort of general enjoyment. There have many great businesses have come out of people just traveling around the world, meeting different types of artisans, and seeing a gap in the market where they can bring it back to certain places and create a business out of it. So, I mean, I would say traveling is a huge thing. Particularly from a globalization perspective, fashion is global. It is not just Western, which tends to be, the talk of fashion majority of the time, but there's so much out there to be explored. And if you really want to understand diversity, which has become a huge talking point, diversity not just in race, but I think also in sort of form, in regards to body, different sizes, men, women, transgender, LGBTQ, and then even those who have sort of many different ways of operating. For instance, they sit down most of the time because of a disability and stuff like that. So I think getting yourself out there and really understanding what's going on within the world, and how you can further develop yourself. I would say that in thinking about it in that way, you're not only just being a designer, but this is what business is about. It's finding the gap in the market and then applying your artistic skills in developing something truly special that people would love.
Perfect. So on that note, Beatrice, who doesn't need an excuse to travel?
That's it. I want to travel.
Exactly. That is a great top tip. So how does anybody that's interested in Mode actually go into the website and join?
So you can go to joinmode.org. Everything's there. Click on the sign up link. You will get a full breakdown of the course and what you're going to learn, and you can just apply. It's just £95, which is like a huge, great, starting price for what we're offering. And we'll be launching more courses in the future, which we're really excited to present to you. So hit that button. And if you have any questions, feel free to send us an email. And you can also follow us on social media, Instagram, at Mode Education.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. Thank you for listening. We will be releasing episodes at least once a month, with each episode featuring a different topic. We'll also have guests joining us, such as founders from our portfolio of startups and fashion industry insiders from our incredible network, to bring further discussions on sustainability, fresh perspectives on design, and many more, all related to fashion tech. Be sure to check us out on social media at beyondform_io, as well as our website beyondform.io for updates. Beyond Form brings human and financial resources together to launch and scale early stage fashion tech startups with ambitious founders. We hope to potentially see some of you joining our venture studio very soon. Don't forget to drop us a line if you'd like to hear us talk about a specific topic. Until next time.